Well, here I am at episode 10, or entry 10 into my father's tales in April of 2020 as we remain on lockdown for the COVID 19 virus here in the Palm Beaches and trying to be productive and use my time um, without just wasting it. But I do want to talk for a moment about episode 9. I need to add something that's pretty important actually. In telling the story about my father with the guy that tried to rob him when he followed him into my dad's business and he wanted the money from the machines, the vending machines, I failed to mention one really important piece of that. The guy was armed. Otherwise, it would have been a different story for my dad. So my dad not only, popped him in the legs, but he had to take the gun and remove it from the guy's, you know, person. And so that was a different scenario than if he'd just, hit the guy, and then my dad, it would have been a very different story for my father. The one about the in the park was completely the way that it was, according to what I read in the paper and what my family told me. The piece of that I definitely know would play out differently today. The criminal, the purse snatcher, would have ended up being the victim, and it would have my dad would have been in trouble uh, for being the one to get the woman's purse and detain the guy until the police got there. So it's not anything that could be done today because it would be turned on my dad. So not something that would play out the same way today. So I needed to add those two things. I have a lot of things on my list. I want to talk about my dad and dancing. Everyone could dance in the family on my mother's side, and all of us. So I feel like sometimes I was born dancing, but he really couldn't. But here again was the thing about him. He got tired of sitting and watching other people dance, and so I was young when he told my mother that he wanted to learn how to dance, and they did. She taught him how to dance in the living room, fast and slow. And that's not to say that he was he burned up the dance floor or anything like that, but because it didn't come natural to him, he didn't have that natural flow. He had rhythm, he just didn't, he couldn't relax into it. He wasn't comfortable, but he did it nonetheless, and both fast and slow. And he didn't just get out there and do the swaying back and forth. He did actual steps, the two step. He did actual dance moves. And so that was pretty cool. But as proud as you are of your parents, at times when you're children, you're really proud of them. When you're adults, you're really proud of things that they do and the things that they went through for you and all of that. But as a kid, there are times when you're not. You're not. You think your parents don't know anything, and my friends always really liked my parents, but they could embarrass me, and like all kids, because they don't know anything. And one of the trips when we went to visit my grandparents in southeast Texas, in the piney woods and the hills and the dales and the deep sand beds that were there. Not only did they have red clay dirt, but they had sand, like ocean sand, white, pristine sand beds that were fabulous to play in. And there was one area that had this little creek that ran through it. It was called Deer Creek because deer would come in and drink water there. And it was ice cold. It was freezing cold, but it had a bridge, a little bridge that went over it. And it was a little wooden bridge. And oh my gosh, I loved to go there. I would get my parents to take me there because it was close to my grandparents' home, but not really close enough for me to walk alone or be there alone anyway. So they would always take me there, and I'd jump off the bridge, and there were pictures somewhere of me mid jump, daddy, me on the bridge, jumping in the water, and it was freezing cold. But one summer we were there, And there were some other kids involved in this, and our car was not big enough to take all these kids to Deer Creek. But we all wanted to go. We were clamoring to go. So Daddy said, we would get in my grandfather's car, who, I don't know what it was. I truly don't know, but it was, the back seat was like a living room, and it had if you know the way Volvos looked way back in the day with the curved top, kind of like a Volkswagen Beetle, but really big, that kind of shape, curvy top. And it was huge. And so we could all pile in the front and the back, we could all be there. And so he pulled off into this deep bed of sand. And when we finished playing, I'm sure my grandfather appreciated a bunch of wet kids in his car, because back in the day, those seats were cloth. I'm sure they had some kind of protection there, because my parents would not have done anything like make his car a mess. But it ended up, some of the kids were I guess, going to go with their parents. They weren't going to be back in my grandparents' car. So there weren't as many kids. And so, but some of the kids were in the front seat, and few were in the back. And we were stuck. He tried to move the car out, and while we were there, the car had sank down into the sand. And he said, "Okay, everyone get in the back seat. Everyone. I don't care how you do it, but everyone get in the back seat." And I thought, "Oh, my dad is so embarrassing. Oh my God, he's so embarrassing." So he said, "If we can get that enough weight back there, we can get out of this." And I'm so embarrassed. So we did. Everyone piled in, the adults that were there, everyone piled in the back, squeezed in there. He gave it gas, and out we came instantly. So they gave me a little more faith, because I was a pretty young kid. But another time that it's like, oh, why is it always my parents doing this? A big group of people, very, very large group, were going to go to a lake in the Fort Worth area, had a beach area with sand and beach chairs, and it was really nice back in the day. I have no idea if that's still, I'm sure it's not still there, but people went there and rented, water devices and stuff. But it was for swimming. And so Daddy got all the kids together. It's like, oh my, why is it always my family? And he said, "All right, everybody buddy up. This is going to be the buddy system. So when you're in the water," and again, you have to remember, I was young, I hadn't heard of the buddy system. "You will have a buddy. And so when you're out there playing, because there's so many of you, and the adults could get distracted and cooking and being social with each other. If you lose sight of your buddy, you have to report it." And I thought, oh my God, it's the buddy system. Oh, how dumb. And of course, not that much later, I found out through various means, oh yeah, the buddy system is used in many, many ways. But it's always, when your parents pull this stuff in front of your friends, it's incredibly embarrassing. You think that your dad and your mother don't know anything. I mean, they don't know as much as other people. Other people's parents are cooler. And then, you realize, your friends like them and stuff. And my dad had a pair of sunglasses that he would wear a lot. He wore prescription glasses, and so instead of taking them off, he would just wear them. He would come inside and he would still have them on. He would wear them outside and stuff. And that always made me so crazy. It made me so crazy because but the thing is that they're really cool sunglasses that Gary could pull off right now and look really good in. But it's like, oh, I hated those sunglasses. It's like, stop wearing those sunglasses. I didn't get in trouble with my dad very much. I really didn't. And he had expectations of us. Table manners were manners. I grew up with them. having manners and respect for adults, having respect for where you were, how you behaved. You could always behave like a lady, and we could go down that road, but I won't. But, have some class, behave with class, behave yourself. We can go anywhere and you know how to act. Knew how to set the table the proper way with the forks on one side and the knife and spoon on the other, and then after the classes, all of these things were important. Well, to both my parents, but I'm talking about my dad right now. And the funny thing about that, learning these certain ways of, my mom was kind of the one that was responsible for, I literally learned how to walk with a book on my head. So you had great posture, but you also didn't bob around and have duck feet and things like that. You walked with your feet straight ahead, and when you stopped, there was a certain stance that you still do that. After these millions of years, when I was learning, you still do it. It is still used. If you look in photos, people still do it. People in business, people, it's still done. And when I was at the Dallas Morning News, we literally taught a class and handed out materials on how to behave at a banquet, how to know when you sit at a table for 10 in a circle, a topper of 10, and that's a circle at a banquet, and all the dishes are together and the glasses and the bread in the bread plate. How do you know which one is which? Is it to the left, to the right? Which one is your bread? Which one is your water? All of these things that I learned, and my boss even said that. She said she went by the same philosophy that Nordstrom's used. She liked to hire people who had already been trained, and trained, pretty well by their parents. And so while I got all of that great training from at home, it still played well for me in my career, especially at certain times of my career where these things were really important. How to behave and conduct yourself. But there was one time when I really did get in trouble with my dad. Really, corporal punishment. I got a spanking. It wasn't horrible or anything like that, but he did apply hand to ass to give me a spanking through my clothes, of course. But he had said specifically they were building a house beside us, and the foundation was up, and it was a really high foundation. And he said that I could go out and play, but I could not get on that foundation because it was dangerous, because they had stuff inside the I could kill myself. I could have died. And just falling and being impaled on something that was inside, being, waiting to go on this foundation. And I was with another person, there were two of us, and went straight to the foundation against his wishes. And again, I was pretty young at that time. I was probably about 7 or 8 years old, something like that. I'm not about that. And we started running on, chasing around the fountain. And of course, she fell. I wasn't the one that fell. She actually fell, but she got hurt. She bunged her leg up pretty seriously. It wasn't broken, but it was she had an injury there. And there was blood involved and all of that, and a lot of crying and screaming and carrying on. And my dad, came out hearing the screaming, and my mother was gone, and that's why he was in charge that day. And I'm sure it scared him to death. Screaming children, he always did. And now as a mother myself through the years and a grandmother, I get it. I get why he was like, stop the screaming. But I was in trouble. And I knew I was in trouble. And while I wasn't hurt and he was relieved, I still got a spanking for that. And it's the only one I ever got in my whole life. And because it, I guess I didn't need it when whatever was not something that was required. But I did get in trouble. And I deserved it, I guess. I didn't think so at the time. But I think more the pain of the spanking me through my clothes. It couldn't have hurt that much, even from my dad. It was the disappointment that he was spanking me. It was a shock. It was a shock. But I guess probably one I never forgot, if you think, but I really thought about it. Anyway, that is episode 10, My Father's Tales.